So, how will Brexit affect immigration to Wales, both for people who are already living in Wales and people who might want to move to Wales for the future? That was the question that the Welsh Government asked us via the Welsh Centre for Public Policy to look at as part of their to underpin their work on what became the Welsh Government's paper, Brexit and Fair Movement of People. So this is an incredibly complicated subject. We need to think about both what happens to people who are already, people in particular people from elsewhere in the EU who are already living in Wales, what happens during the transition period, which is likely to start after the official Brexit date in 2019 and continue till sometime in 2021. What happens to people moving to Wales then? And also what happens to future immigration policy when we have what you might call full Brexit, that is to say we have our own new immigration policy after the end of the transition period. So we looked at all of those things. First of all, what happens to people who are already living in Wales? Well, there are about 80,000 nationals of other EU member states currently living in Wales, and the government's intention, as part of the deal with the rest of the EU, is that all of those people will be offered an opportunity to take up permanent residence in the UK, and there'll be a sort of process for doing that. So that hopefully should provide a measure of security and reassurance to EU nationals currently resident. But it is going to be a complicated process. There will be people who fall through the cracks. And one interesting thing that our research turned up, which surprised me to some extent, was that there's a sort of popular image that European migrants to the UK are mostly young single people, perhaps without particularly deep roots, and that is true of quite a few of them, but actually we discovered that a pretty large proportion of EU nationals currently resident in Wales actually are part of a family, often with children, and for those people obviously the sense of insecurity that has been caused by the Brexit process is a very real issue, and the sooner people can be assured that they will get permanent status without too much of the sort of bureaucratic, excessively lengthy forms that the current process imposes on people, the better. And that will benefit not just them, of course, but their employers and the Welsh economy as a whole. Then what happens during the transition? Well, at the moment it looks like the government's going to sign up for a transition which effectively means that free movement continues even after Brexit for the rest of 2019 and all of 2020. So effectively, even though we're going to Brexit in March 2019 in a legal sense, actually nothing very much will change, and nothing will change very much in terms of the rights of EU nationals moving to the UK. And again, that should provide some assurance both for people wanting to move here and for employers and businesses that they'll be able to continue to get workers for the transition period. So in the short term, it looks as if not much will change. However, after 2021, there will be a new immigration system in place. We will have to put into place a new post-Brexit immigration system. What will that mean for Wales? Well, Welsh businesses, like businesses across the country, are in some sectors quite dependent on migrant workers, and particularly workers from the EU. Wales is actually less dependent than the EU as a whole on migrant workers, but some sectors still have quite a high dependence, particularly for new recruits. That's particularly true for manufacturing, for hotels and catering, but also for health and social care and higher education. Again, although there's something of an image that the majority of workers from elsewhere in the EU are in some sense low skilled, that's actually not true. Not true in general, and it's certainly not true in Wales as a whole. There are plenty of low-skilled workers from elsewhere in the EU, but there are also plenty of medium-skilled workers and plenty of high-skilled workers, and they work in a number of sectors that are of quite major importance to the UK. So what should Wales be looking for a post-Brexit immigration system? I think that the one thing which comes out of the data is that Wales, on the whole, has somewhat lower incomes, somewhat lower wages than the rest of the country. Now, the current immigration system for non-EU nationals prioritizes sectors and occupations with higher wages over those with lower wages. So to the extent that we replicate that after Brexit for EU workers as well, whether through the imposition of a salary threshold overall or through focusing on particular sectors and having quotas for particular sectors, Wales is quite likely to be disadvantaged by any such system. Wales will not be in the front of the queue, or Welsh employers are not likely to be in the front of the queue for visas for workers after Brexit if the system looks very similar to the system that currently operates for non-EU workers. And I think that knowledge that Wales is going to be to a significant extent disadvantaged by the end of free movement underpins the recommendations in the Welsh Government paper for trying to two things, I think. First of all, trying to preserve as far as possible some of the advantages of free movement, its flexibility, the ability it gives to employers and workers at all skill levels to be able to come to Wales, and also the suggestion that there might be some degree of regional differentiation that allows Wales, which has its own particular needs in terms of sectors, in terms of skills, that allows Wales to be able to recruit Welsh businesses and employers to be able to recruit relatively flexibly. And I think that need is also particularly underpinned by something else which we looked at briefly, which was Wales's particular demographics. Wales, like the rest of the UK, has an ageing population, and Wales, like the rest of the UK, has fertility which is somewhat below replacement rate. But those factors are significantly more pronounced in Wales than in England. So Wales faces the challenge of an ageing population, the challenge of a potentially shrinking population over the next 20 or 30, 40 years without immigration. And those challenges are significantly greater from a demographic perspective than they are for England as a whole. And that, I think, also justifies the need for, from a public policy point of view, for Wales to try and make itself more attractive to immigration and to try and have a regime, an immigration policy regime that, inside or outside the EU, is relatively liberal, encourages people to come to Wales. To put it bluntly, Wales needs people to come from abroad more than England as a whole. And I think that applies not just to EU nationals, actually, but also to non-EU nationals. And again, Wales should be looking through policy to try and encourage more non-EU nationals to emigrate to Wales as well. I found working with the Welsh Centre for Public Policy and working with the Welsh Government on this project absolutely fascinating. There's a long way to go in the Brexit process. There's possibly an even longer way to go before we know exactly what the post-Brexit immigration system looks like. But I hope that we've made some contribution to Welsh policy and the Welsh public debate. Thank you.